Lucy, why this topic? Because COVID has shown us some different scenarios, and we still do not have, definite answers to what is happening with patients. We keep on struggling with our numbers of biomarkers and a lot of other things, and we ultimately end up giving a cocktail of therapy, and we find that the patient is not good and patient is no more. So it has been very well known that immunosuppression is a major issue in sepsis, and what I'll talk in next 25 minutes or so would be, is there really an immunosuppression in sepsis? What are the mechanisms? Is liver cirrhosis, it is different in cirrhosis? How does it affect the outcome? What therapies have been offered and outcomes so far? Immunostimulation is way forward, and what really is upcoming now. So this is very well known to all of you that we do have initially in sepsis a pro-inflammatory response. Majority of the patients survive this insult by compensated anti-inflammatory response syndrome, and they come out. But it is the late deaths we have due to persistent immunosuppression that is very, very critical. So let's look into one study with 40 ICU patients, survivors were followed up. Unfortunately, they could follow up only 15 at 6 months. And remaining 25 patients, when they were trying to look at the blood samples after 6 months, found that 3 had died within 6 months. Few refused to come back. Some were to other hospitals. They were out of contact. And when they looked into some specific parameters where immunosuppression, how is it recovering, the HLA-DR expression in monocytes, they found that at discharge, almost 33 patients had good level, but at 6 months post-discharge, most of them had very good restoration of their HLA-DR expression. Similarly, CD4 cell, again at 6 months, those who came had very good restoration. The CD4 cell had gone up to 600 and 800. But still, what we find, that once this immunosuppression occurs, long-term immune dysfunction persists. And you look at one of the studies where they found that there were 75% who died within 5 years, but look at this, 43% within 1 year of discharge from ICU. And that's why the thought process came that there is a sepsis-induced immunosuppression. And what is the mechanism? We know simply that when a bacteria or a virus enters, attacks the neutrophil, the chemotaxis occurs, clearance of pathogens, macrophage activation, and they are able to achieve a clearance. But when there is an immune dysregulation, the inflammatory cytokines, the damage-associated molecular patterns, and PAMs, all those continue to disrupt the endothelium, and the process goes haywire. And this is what is happening. You have innate immunity, you have an adaptive immunity, and both the expression of HLA-DR and exhaustion of CD4 T cells, then the role of the TRAC cells which come up, and finally, when you find that your even adaptive immune system fails because of increased apoptosis and antigen-specific antibody production. So what happens? It's happening at every field, whether it is bone marrow, blood, organs. Here the neutrophils, you find altered neutrophil function, chemotaxis is reduced, and decreased myeloperoxidase leads to altered first line of defense. When you have immature neutrophils, you find inhibition of T cell proliferation. When you have cytokines coming in and decreased HLA-DR expression, altered inflammatory response sets in, release of these cytokines, and finally, there is incomplete activation of T cells. And that is the crux of the issue. So, what will it cause? Where are we focusing on? Decreased GM-CSF, and we are using it very commonly now. We have interferon gamma. We have, on the other hand, regular T cells, and the effector T cells, so there is a proliferation of these. And finally, the circulating cells, the effector B cells, which are reduced. So when there is a decreased effector function and regulatory function gets increased, you get after the adaptive immunity. And finally, you find that whenever there is an injury, you find the central nervous system regulation, apoptic regulation, the patient factors, the treatment we give, antibiotics, catecholamines, blood transfusion, nutrition, what it leads to: systemic inflammation, organ failure, and early mortality, which occurs in 10% of patients. If they are in ICU, 40%. Delayed mortality because of immunosuppression, because of nosocomial infections we introduce, and long-lasting disturbances. This is very, very critical. And there is a corollary to sepsis and cancer. And that's why now there is a role for immunostimulation, what you're using in cancer, rampantly. So these are some of the inflammatory mediators. We know I need not elucidate, but it is very important. If you remember TNF-alpha therapy, 90s it was talked about, and it certainly failed. It did not give a good result in patients of sepsis. So whether it is bacteria, lipopolysaccharide and TLR4 receptors, whether they are viruses, whether it is fungal infection, ultimately this is the expression of inflammatory gene, nuclear factor kappa B expression, which leads to these cytokines and chemokines, and which produce hypoxemia, deranged kidney functions, liver, disturbances of consciousness, septic cardiomyopathy and hypertension, and DIC. So this is what is the immune intervention we can look into in future. And how is it different in cirrhosis? There is this Landbach paper from I think Velour, or I forgot, where they looked into that they have hyperdynamic circulation, in which a lot of patients of sepsis may also have. They have subclinical cardiomyopathy, they have central hypovolemia, third space accumulation very commonly, and there is a cirrhosis-associated immune dysfunction, which affects both innate and acquired immune functions. And it is dependent on when you have persistent systemic inflammation, severity of liver disease with portal hypertension, increased gut permeability, reduction in gut motility, and altered gut microbiota. So what happens in cirrhosis? There are two important things you need to understand. In any sepsis, you would like there is avoidance, there is resistance, which the body fights, and this inflammation leads to red cell destruction, overwhelming heme production, and when you have this removed by ferritin, when you find high levels of ferritin, this is because you have this gene expression of ferritin subunit FTH. In a cirrhotic, it becomes aberrant. Even the macrophages become dysfunctional, reduced hepatocytes G6PD activity. But when it becomes still at this stage, body is able to manage. But when sepsis progresses, the tolerance is completely gone. And once the tolerance is gone, then your persistent immunosuppression would always remain. So to improve hepatocyte function, improving the macrophage function, maintaining glucose homeostasis becomes our cornerstone of treatment. So you use iron chelators, antioxidants. You also think of types of controlled glucose infusions and GM-CSF factors. Other thing happens is if you keep these patients with bacterial infection and cirrhotics, fasting, for that matter in any scenario, ketosis, immune activation, reduction of stress responses, and improved defense against oxidant activation, again helps in tolerance to bacterial-driven inflammation. So early cirrhosis or obese patients with NASH, anti-tumor effects, fat mobilization, decreasing lipotoxicity, and improved glucose homeostasis, improved profile, these all help in tolerance to bacterial-driven inflammation. But in late stage, there is no non-carbohydrate source of gluconeogenesis. There is fatty tissue breakdown, which happens with significant cirrhosis. And finally, there is sarcopenia, malnutrition. All these, the fasting worsens the immune functions, and metabolic dysfunction and recurrent infection set in these patients. So this is what is important, that fasting metabolism and impact, especially in cirrhotics, is very, very critical to understand. Now, how does it affect the outcome? So you have both inflammatory and anti-inflammatory thing happening, and immunosuppression. So we find that some patients are benefited, but others suffer with the same therapy. And as corollary to sepsis and cancer, you see all these, what we see in patients with sepsis, here these therapies, whether GM-CSF or anti-TNF or anti-PD-1 antibodies or anti-CTL4, which are in phases of, say, phase 2 and phase 3 trials. Some phase 3 trials have already been completed. So what it depends upon is type, location, severity of infection, age of the patient, and existing comorbidities. And 2/3 of death from sepsis in late phase are due to secondary bacterial and fungal infection. And so we need to look into this immunopheresis. What are the therapies which have been happened? So why they have failed immune therapies? Because we use single mediator directed therapy to heterogeneous population and people with comorbidities and complex and evolving immune responses. Hence, you need to identify a personalized immune therapy or a personalized medicine for these patients. So what you have is a phase of protracted immunosuppression, and once you have that, which lasting for months, leads to these late mortality of ICU discharge patients. And couple of studies have shown there is widespread immune depression in major organs. Also, many of them still had unresolved foci of infection at death. So instead of what is happening here, what the recovery normal should have been, it is the prolonged immunosuppression which is causing this problem, which is either your CD4-CT ratio, which is dysfunctional. And many times the numbers are okay, but it is the function which is not taking place. So your CD4 count may be 800, but the function is impaired. So what is immunostimulation? So this titany of failures where individualized therapy has led to that overproduction was a primary cause of death in a lot of these patients. There is no single stratified approach in immunomodulatory therapy. Like I told you that TNF in 1990s failed because it was just one target we were doing. We have huge number of biomarkers, 180, but primarily they look into two things. If you look into HLA-DR expression following sepsis, and if you look into lymphopenia, these would give you a better outcome to understand what you need to do further. And that's not easy, that's not difficult to do. Like for cirrhosis and sepsis, we do routinely procalcitonin, but if you look into neutrophilic motility dysfunction, which is very, very critical to identify, we don't do that. Proadrenomedulin, again, there would be another biomarker would come. Right now they're talking about proadrenomedulin. Then the monocyte distribution width, which can end neutrophil deformability test. That can be easily done. Neutrophilic CD64, again, another marker you would look into. Then in intensive care, infection score, and we know that there are different scores for that, and interleukin-6 and other interleukin, but for liver, MELD and MELD sodium, which is a good marker for you to look into outcome in that. So what you need now is programmed death receptors, PDN, with ligand and cytotoxic lymphocyte association with ligand CD8 and CD860. So in septic shock, you have increased expression of these, and when there is increased expression of these, there is bound to be increased mortality. So what we need is an integrated approach and immune bioscore and moving towards a point of care testing. So what we know, there is now revival and resurgence, GM-CSF and G-CSF, we are using that, or specific anti-PD-L1 antibodies like nivolumab, when you have overlap in immune deficiency and cancer sepsis, or combined anti-PD-L and T-cell and cytokine inhibition. So the single therapy would not help you. Interferon gamma to restore monocyte function. But however, at the moment, there are concerns. Individually, these in phase 2 trials have shown good results, but combining the two, we still don't know what is the answer. We know about interferon gamma. Now it is very well approved in patients with chronic granulomatous disease and especially fungal infection, fungal sepsis. Using interferon gamma is now recommended even by sepsis guidelines. Also, you can use it as an adjuvant in septic shock. GM-CSF, again, we know we are using for immune stimulatory effect, anti-inflammatory. What is the way forward? IL-7 is a good promising molecule which is coming up, which we know is produced by thymus in bone marrow. It affects both, because we need to target innate and adaptive immunity both. Targeting only would not help. And it also enhances the function of interferon gamma. So again, trial to see restoration of lymphocyte count in sepsis phase 3 trial is still on, and result will be out in 2022. Thymosin alpha-1, again, alone or in combination with illustratin, there are 1 or 2 trials, and it helps in increasing the expression, what had happened of the HLA-DR. Intravenous immunoglobulins, we know that there are certain set of recommendations where it can be used, and IgM-rich immunoglobulin may be better than the conventional immunoglobulin we use. We also know about extracorporeal things, about cytosorb, about the euphoresis. We know that an ultimate outcome in this trial did not show a significant benefit in terms of mortality, but certainly length of stay, ICU stay, out of ICU did help, and in a subset of patients with abdominal infection, there was significant reduction in mortality in these patients. And that is because when they looked into CD4, TRAC cells, and what happens after polymyxin hemoperfusion exchange, and what happens 24 hours after that, there's a significant reduction in these CD4 and TRAC cells were seen. Cytosorb, again, a limited use, but yes, can be used initially. But it's not the only solution for a post immunosuppression which is persisting for 6 months. So we also know that the molecules we use like noradrenaline also helps in macrophage migration, also influence cytokine release. We know vasopressin has cytokine level suppression more than noradrenaline. So what are the targets where we can work on? So we can work on these monocyte macrophages by anti-PD-1 and anti-PD-L1. We can also work with IL-7 and IL-51 to restore the T cell functions, reducing the TRAC cells. We can also work with anti-IL-10 and anti-TGB, transforming growth factor beta, and we can work with GCSF and GCSF here. So we need to work at all levels together rather than in silo. So you need to understand that it is a complex process of immunosuppression which is going on, and we need to so what is the method, how can you judge those? Most of them can be easily judged with flow cytometry or immunohistochemistry. And the simple, like ipilimumab, the anti-CTLA-4 monoclonal antibody, again used in cancer, can certainly be used in patients with reduced T cells. Those who have suppressor T cells, you can use that very well. A word about gut microbiota in patients with cirrhosis, very well known to you, and we know that there is a dysbiosis in cirrhosis, and increased production of these opiates, bacterial overgrowth, intestinal dysmotility, increased catecholamines. So it translates into a repeated infections and antimicrobial use, pathobiopoints, MDR infections, you get resistome, and finally organ failure. So modulation of microbiota is a way forward in a lot of patients with cirrhosis. Don't want to show you this crowded slide, but just want to focus on this. What do we have? The future therapies. We know all this is happening, immune dysfunction and dysfunction of the organs. So you need immune modulation, you need mitochondrial damage prevention, and you also need other therapies. And if you use them for patients who are survivor of post-sepsis syndrome, probably that long-term mortality you see at 6 months would not be seen. Of course, you need to take care of those existing comorbidities. So just to summarize, increased mortality in patients from ICU is thought to be due to prolonged immunosuppression they have. In fact, one study which got published 2 days back showed that they had 20% mortality after discharge within 2 weeks of discharge. The mechanisms are well understood. We know that there is alteration in innate and adaptive immunity. We do have tests to predict the HLA-DR4 expression, lymphopenia, and others. We need not only quantitative, they have defined HLA-DR4. If it is more than 15,000, you be rest assured there will be nothing. If it is less than 5,000, the patient is doomed to die. But we also need not only quantitative but qualitative assessment, because we've seen patients with HLA-DR4 expression at 15,000 in some of the studies, and still they did not survive because the functional assessment was not done. Immune checkpoint inhibitors may help in identifying this state as well. Immunostimulation in form of personalized medicine with multiple targets is the way forward. Combining these all therapies in a patient judiciously rather than using 4, 5, 6, maybe 2 or 3 of them. Challenges in developing adjunctive immune modulating therapies. Not only disease-specific cohorts, but subphenotypes are identified who might benefit. So, because of heterogeneity and different disease cohorts, you need to identify subphenotypes who might benefit. In cirrhosis, we need still more studies to understand the specific intervention to diagnose and manage immunosuppression. So I would end with this, that early stage, you have all your gadgets, machines, you're taking care of all that. Look into cytokine storm. If there is no cytokine storm, no immunotherapy. If you have cytokine storm, you use anti-cytokine storm, and you still find there is no homeostasis achieved. Immunosuppression is this means persisting, and you then will have to intervene to give drugs to enhance the immune function. So I know there are no easy answers. I'm not able to give you an algorithm, but only I can say is that if you find patients are getting admitted again in your ICU in a short span of time, please look for immunosuppression. Look to work for those, and finding out some of these expression with flow cytometry can be easy, can be, I think, doable here. And if we do something like that and look at that expression of HLA-DR4 and CD4-CT ratio, and then manage our patients in addition to giving them all of the therapy which we are giving, probably we will be able to prevent their readmissions to ICU, probably not getting a lot of antibiotics. I mean, using antibiotics would come down, and that's what it is. So we have to upfront identify these patients who, and there's those who continue to have symptoms, in addition to symptoms, continue to have evidence in form of these investigations we need to look into. Thank you very much, sir.